So now let me go on to the Senate campaign, where Tim Kaine's the Democratic nominee. George Allen has 3 challengers for the Republican nomination, but I'm going to assume that Allen's going to win that primary. Not because Marshall and Radke couldn't be credible candidates, just because Allen, I think, is far better known, had a very impressive record as governor, and has far more resources. So barring a remarkable upset, my sense is that Allen's likely to be that nominee. This race is also going to be a marquee race in the nation, because the Republicans think if they can pick up 4 Senate seats in the country, they can get the majority in the Senate. And the reason the Republicans think these 4 Senate seats are doable is that every 2 years we elect 1/3 of the Senate. The 1/3 that are up this year include 23 seats out of the 33 that are currently held by Democrats. So that the Democrats are defending far more territory in the U.S. Senate than Republicans are. Republicans are defending 10 seats, the Democrats 23. So the math seems to say it should be a potentially good year for the Republicans if they can get these 4 seats. And here, with the Webb seat opening up, the Republicans feel, and a candidate like George Allen, they feel they have a real chance of taking this seat. Now, the challenge for this seat this year is this. So much of that election for Senate is actually going to be determined by what happens at the top of the ticket in the presidential race. And I've recently spoken with both George Allen and Tim Kaine, and both mentioned this in the conversations that I had with them about, that why this is a different election this way. Let's just think for a moment. How many people do you think in Virginia are going to go in on election day and vote for Barack Obama and then vote for George Allen? I mean, there will be some. You never know how anybody thinks. There'll be people who do this, but the reality is that if Barack Obama carries Virginia, there's probably a 98% chance or a 95% chance that Tim Kaine is the next U.S. Senator. Because the Allen campaign is going to be directed at Obama. It is going to be talking about Obamacare. It's going to be talking about Kaine's connection to the National Democratic Party. It's going to be talking about Kaine's support for Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama. It's going to be a very partisan campaign. When I spoke with the former senator, governor, he said, I'd love to run just a campaign that put 10 issues down the page in which Tim Kaine and I are different, whether it be energy or whether it be health care and all of these issues. He says, but the reality is we're going to focus on a much smaller range of this. It's going to be an election in part about Obamacare and he says, and that's what it's about. And Allen, he's somewhat uncertain about Romney. That on one hand, it's clear that Romney's probably, of the group they have, the best candidate, but, he's stepping on his message a lot. The 2 Cadillacs that he has, and then he said, well, it's not that bad, we just have one at each house. On that front there. So, and Allen and Susan Allen is, so they're a little worried about this. And what they're going to do is essentially say, Tim Kaine's not the guy who you thought he was when he ran for governor of Virginia as Mark Warner's younger brother. He's really sort of first cousin to Nancy Pelosi, Harry Reid, Obamacare, and all the liberal Democrats. That's who he is. And that's Allen's campaign. It's Allen's campaign's that. Now, is there anybody who's going to vote for Mitt Romney and then Tim Kaine? And in fact, you might say this is what this race is all about in some ways. Kaine is going to try to find some way of hoping that if Romney even carries Virginia by a small amount, there'll be some crossover to Kaine. Allen's attempting to shut that down. In so many ways, this is what that race is about. So Kaine is trying to find some ways of essentially getting some of that Romney vote. Now, where and how are they trying to do that? How is Obama, this is also related to how Obama is trying to do this. This gets back to all the discussion that Reggie had about the social issues in the General Assembly. Because this is where Kaine thinks he can get those votes. What Kaine thinks is that I can find some way of depicting George Allen so that independent, moderate women are going to come over and vote for me. Maybe not huge numbers, but enough so that if Mitt Romney wins with 51%, I might have a chance of winning. And I've seen this in a couple of ways. I watched their first debate a couple of months ago. And it was very, very interesting because this whole issue, everyone was saying, what's going to happen when they raise the macaca moment? And the way they raised it, because George Allen, if you ask him about it, he apologizes. He says, I shouldn't have done it, it was the wrong thing. I've learned from it, now I'm focusing on the important things and all of that. But how they raised it in the debate is they raised it in this way. They said to Tim Kaine, and the reporter said, George Allen's apologized 50 times for this thing. It took place in 2006. And your campaign said yesterday, to Kaine they said this, that you still intend to talk about this during the contest. Why don't you just accept George Allen's apology and pledge today not to talk about it? And Kaine said, absolutely not. And he said, well, it's part of a pattern. He said, this is the same guy who said he wanted to knock the Democrats' soft teeth down their whiny throats. He said, he's the guy who, he said 5 minutes ago, he called everybody who worked for the federal government a sanctimonious social engineer. He said, he's a bully. And I'm going to continue to talk about his temperament compared to mine. Essentially, Kaine said, I'm a bridge builder. I don't want to divide people. I want to bring them together, bring everybody on board. That's what we need in Washington. We need more people who want to build bridges, not people who want to, draw these lines. And it put Allen off balance for a while. Because, on one hand, he was expecting the question, but he was expecting the question to go to him. What do you say? He didn't expect it to go to Kaine. And then what do you do when somebody calls you a bully in politics? You hit him? And Allen's a feisty guy, so he likes that give and take. What do you do? All of that is about the votes of women. Is what Kaine's campaign is thinking. I'm looking to, portray him as a frat guy, as a jock, as somebody who there in the Kaine campaign, I think essentially assumes that he's a guy who's women friendly in this way. So whether that'll work or not, I don't know. But that's why the Democrats really grabbed onto these social issues in the assembly session.